I love all the chatty people. It's great. It's good. All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I think we're live. Welcome to night 2 of our information sessions for the upcoming May 12th special and annual town meeting. If you haven't met me last time, my name is Michael Rosen. I'm the town's assistant general manager. And tonight we're going to be going through night 2's information session, which is going to focus on town meeting 101, land use 101, and then we're going to go through special town meeting number 2's articles, which there are 10 of them for this upcoming town meeting, which is again May 12th. You're going to hear me keep beating that like a broken record here. I'm joined by Gerri Slater. She's the town moderator. We'll be hearing from her very soon. I just also wanted to, while I have the slides for a second here, I just wanted to advertise that tomorrow night, May 1st, we do have one more information session. It's the final information session prior to our upcoming town meeting. This information session is going to focus on special town meeting number 1's 12 articles, and then also talk about the Community Preservation Act articles, of which there are 7 projects, plus also a couple of other articles, which will make more sense tomorrow when you see the agenda. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Gerri Slater, again, Madam Moderator, who is going to be a familiar face to you at town meeting coming up. Thank you.
The beauty of it is I can stand and still have the mic right here. So welcome everybody, and thank you, Mike. First of all, thank you all for being here. Number one, thank you for being here to be part of the information session. So you're prepared, ready, whether you're online or you're here in person, or you're watching this on demand on NCM. Also, the town is providing replays as well in order to prepare yourself for the business at hand at upcoming town meeting. And a huge thank you for being willing to serve. So being a town meeting member is, I'm going to say it's the most important position in this town, because town meeting members are the ones who vote on the most important business of the town. So how many people here are new town meeting members? Okay, we've got a few. So for the veterans, some of this may be old hat, but we'll take it from there. All right, this is what we're going to cover tonight, and I'm going to be joined in a few moments by Town Clerk Mary Lou Boland and FinCom Chair Maya Bodenhofer, who will be handling parts of this presentation as well. Obviously, we just went through the purpose of the session and some of the introductions for the people that will be joining me. We're going to go through the different types of town meeting, including the calendar. Some of that for folks that who've been with us for a while, you know the cadence, but for the new folks, that'll be important. Rules and procedure, how you can register to speak, which is something that is unique to the Norwood Town Meeting. And I will say is the envy of many moderators in the Commonwealth when they hear about it. Talk about the warrant, what it is and what it isn't. And then, as I said, we'll also be talking about still slightly new electronic voting at town meeting, which we were happy to introduce last year, right? So we'll go from there. Town clerk will talk a little bit about the prep. And then I'll just quickly tell you what the selectmen do. To be honest with you, Mr. Donnelly, no disrespect, but it's like a quick before town meeting mention of what the selectmen do. So in the interest of time, I'm going to cover it. And then the role of the Finance Commission, which again, for annual town meeting is extremely important. Maya will take us through that. So now what? You're elected to town meeting. You're walking into the auditorium at Norwood Senior High School, and it's, what are you being faced with? So a little of that is, first of all, we ask, and Mike mentioned it, we will start at 6:30 on the 12th, and those of you who are veteran town meeting members know that I will gavel us at 6:30. The expectation is that we have a quorum at that point and we can shove right through after some opening things that we do, like the pledge, like a little bit quickly on the rules, announcements and such. We will also swear in new town meeting members. The town clerk will talk about that as well. But we hope that you'll be ready to go. We ask that town meeting members sit in the front of the auditorium. Two very important reasons for that. One is so I can see you if you want to be called on. And the second reason is with electronic voting, there is a transmitter within the hall that's in the front of the auditorium. So in order to make sure that your electronic voting device is working, we ask that you move to the front. We have a section, we will have a section in the back that will be cornered off with police tape for non-town meeting members. And again, anyone who is registered to vote in the town of Norwood can attend and participate by speaking at town meeting, but only town meeting members can vote. The other thing which you're already doing now is before you get there, and again, recommend you get there about 6:15 or so in order to check in. And again, Mary Lou will take you through everything you need to do before you sit down, is the preparation. Budget books are here tonight. They're available at Town Hall. Please look at the budget book before you come to town meeting. You'll be able to follow along as we vote on the different motions, but all the detail for the town and school budget and is listed in there, including the shared services budget as well. So very important. Maya will talk about that a little bit more, but please try to prep in advance. So we are representative town meeting. We are one of 32 communities in the Commonwealth that continue to be a representative town meeting, which means that we have representatives from 9 districts. You all are elected by your districts. You represent your district. We will have, throughout the year, we have basically 2 different kinds of town meetings. The town meeting that we have coming up on the 12th, which is part of our bylaw, is the annual town meeting. That is where the budget for the town is presented, as well as the Community Preservation Act articles. We also will have special town meetings throughout the year. Typically, our cadence is the fall, around the October-November town timeline. We do, if there is enough business, have a zoning town meeting in the winter months. Winter apparently is the time for zoning, Sarah, I guess, right? So that typically happens in the January, February, March timeframe if we have enough business to act on. And then, of course, the annual and specials coming up in May. This time we have not only one special, but we will have 2 specials, which you should have seen as you've gotten your warrant already. Rules. Again, we are very, very fortunate in the town of Norwood. And, I participate in the Massachusetts Moderators Association. I'm a member of the board of directors. There are many different variations of rules for town meetings. Some follow parliamentary procedure. Some follow Robert's Rules. Some follow a publication called Town Meeting Time. We actually have our rules written in our town bylaws. So everything that really governs town meeting occurs in the town bylaws. That is up, and one of the things that you have up there is you have a QR code. That QR code on every page of this presentation will take you to the town meeting page on the town website. All the resources that you need are there, including the town bylaws, the act establishing town meeting, all the warrants, All the records of town meeting, including voting records and attendance records, are there. So it's a one-stop shopping to learn that. Couple of things to just point out on the rules. It talks about debate, the amount of time that you are allowed to speak on a particular issue. For speakers, regular town meeting speakers who are recognized by the moderator, you have 5 minutes. You can have a one-time extension by our rules for that if voted by the body. For presentations, in other words, a proponent of an article or a board or committee, for instance, the FinCom, many times have the presentation. The school committee may have a presentation, planning board at all. There is a 10-minute time frame, and it can be 20 minutes for a group. Again, in both of those cases, it can be a one-time extension. Couple of things is I ask you to take a look at things like point of order and point of privilege. A lot of times our members will raise their hand with point of order. The only reason that you would be asking about a point of order, and the only reason I would recognize you, is if you think there's a rule violation. Now that's rare. Not only am I there, but town council is there. So, and I have, as you might imagine, a lot of eyes watching over me. A point of privilege is if you need personal assistance. And again, that is rare. And so please do not try to abuse either one of those, as sometimes members will do. Rules committee. It's another thing that's in our bylaws, and I will tell you, lucky everybody, because one of the things the moderator has to do after this annual town meeting is appoint a new rules committee. We do it every 5 years. The current rules committee's term is ending with this annual town meeting, so I'll be appointing one of those. Addressing town meeting, Mike mentioned, I'm addressed as Madam Moderator. Any questions go through me. Please raise your hand to be recognized. We have mic runners that will get a mic to you. One of the other things that we will also try to do is have mics that you can walk up to in order to speed things along. We have a lot of business to be doing. Once you're recognized by the moderator, you state your name and your district. If you are not a town meeting member, you would state your name and address. Registering to speak. Tony.
Are we allowed to ask questions at this point?
Excuse me?
Is it all right to ask a question at this point?
You can, yeah, if it's on what.
First of all, thank you so much for the info session. I think you do a great job as moderator. I love the new clickers. I have a question about the bylaws, and I mentioned this now because the rules committee you say is going to be reorganizing again. And I had asked you this question in the email, but I never extended it. So I just kind of like out in the open. So if you're ready to speak, you get 5 minutes, unless you get allowed to go longer. But a proponent of an article gets to do a PowerPoint. But if I wanted to speak against it, I could not do a PowerPoint, even though it's within 5 minutes. I did not follow. I respected the answer, but I actually didn't know where that was in our bylaws.
Yep,
it's
right in the rules. Right in the rules.
Okay.
That and presentations. The word presentations, I will tell you that is in. It says presentations, but it's materials is actually what it's referring to, and actually talks about those needing to be 2 members in advance, at least. I believe it's 7 days in advance of the meeting, any materials. Now, what I do is if you want to have a PowerPoint out on the table, because you can speak against it, but just for practicality of every speaker having a PowerPoint just doesn't make a lot of sense in order to keep the meeting going, and our rules do not.
So is that a Norwood bylaw or is that a state law?
No, it's a Norwood bylaw. Our rules are in the Norwood bylaw. Down in Norwood. Thanks for the question. All right, registering to speak. Registering to speak is, again, something that is unique to us here in Norwood. It is in our bylaws. If you know that you want to speak on a particular article, you can register with the moderator via email, and my email is very simple. It's moderator@norwood.ma. Norwood. Thank you. You can call me, or you can come up to me before town meeting. The warrant is already out, so you are eligible to register for any article once the warrant is published. It is out. So if you know you want to speak on an article, the way to guarantee that you will be called on before someone moves the question, which means we stop debate, is by registering to speak. So I strongly suggest if you have something to say on an article, you register in advance to ensure that you will be able to speak.
How far in advance?
Once the warrant is out. So
Oh,
once the
yeah.
warrant is published, and it is published now, you can register with me. The best way to register is actually through email, because that way, and I take the registration, the speakers in the order in which they register. So there's no mystery there. I'm not stacking a deck or anything like that. It truly is. And with an email, I have a record of when people are registered. Question, yeah.
How many registered speakers do you allow per article?
As many as registered. There's no limit on the number of registered speakers, and a registered speaker cannot move the question, which means if you're registered to speak, you will be guaranteed, because if someone tries to stop debate who is a registered speaker, I will call them out of order per our rules. Okay, great questions. Thank you. The warrant, we just talked about the warrant. The warrant is out, and the warrant is the only business that we are allowed to discuss at town meeting. If it is not in the warrant, if it is not public, advertised, can't do it. So many times people may have another issue they want to bring to town meeting. We can't have it. I can't recognize it. And again, same thing. You'll see me respectfully tell the party who's speaking that they are out of order. So please make sure anything that you are bringing up is within the confines of the warrant. We call it the four corners. I will give as much leeway as possible to remaining within the four corners of the actual article to recognize you, but if it is something completely off, so for instance, if it is a zoning bylaw article and on flood plan, and you want to talk about kennels, I'm gonna call you out of order. So just be aware of that. The other thing that's really, really important to know is the warrant are the articles. So the articles are basically announcing the business that we are going to discuss and vote on at town meeting. The motions are the exact details. So a great example of that, and Maya will talk about it, is with some of the financial articles. We may not know numbers. You may not see numbers in the article, but the motion will have the exact dollar amounts in it. So sometimes it gets a little confusing because you're looking at an article and saying, wait a minute, that wasn't what you told me about. Yeah, it was, because it's the details of the article that go in the motion. Okay. Now we get to the fun part real quick. So electronic voting. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Show and tell.
Show and tell. This is a clicker. There, a clicker. It's the size of a credit card. The good news is for people like me who would lose something like this, we have a lovely lanyard for you to wear that hopefully will make sure that you don't move it. Electronic voting has been a game changer for town meeting. It has created efficiencies, accuracy, and I got to tell you, as a moderator, it takes everything. There's no doubt out of the equation of how a vote goes. Many times, for particular motions, there could be a majority vote, but there maybe a 2/3 depending on the motion, or in case of unpaid bills, 9/10. This gives us an absolute exact count. Fortunately, our chief financial officer sits right next to me and Mary Lou up on the stage at town meeting. So if I can't do the math on 2/3, Jeff has got me covered on that. But we have the exact count on that. These are only work within the hall. They are totally secure. We are using the same system. We did a lot of work on this that is used by the House of Representatives, the United States House of Representatives. So they have a little bit of a fancier thing. It's built into their tables and everything, but it is absolutely the same system from Meridia. We're really excited about it. Mary Lou will talk to you about what happens if you try to leave the hall with your clicker. I make the joke at the end of town meeting, if you try to leave the hall and you're successful, no one has been successful yet, do not take that as a challenge. Retired Chief Brooks will show up at your house. Just saying. All right. The clickers, the electronic voting devices are very simple. There are only 3 buttons on there. As you can see there, there's a yes, there's a no, there's an abstention. I will basically open up the voting. We'll test the clickers, by the way, before we start, to just make sure everybody's clicker is working and you know how to use them. It's the first night of town meeting. I will open up the vote. There will be approximately 60 seconds for everyone to vote, which is a change based on your feedback, by the way. 10 seconds before voting is going to close, I will give you a warning. I will announce the voting is closed, and then we'll announce the results. You'll actually see the results on the screen, on the big screen as well. In addition, the results are published on the town meeting site by the town clerk's office as well. So there's full transparency on that. If you change your mind, so for instance, if you're voting yes and then you're like, well, I don't know, I really meant no, you can change your vote as long as the voting hasn't closed. The last vote, the last button that you press is the one that's going to get registered. All right. And you'll also see an OK on the keypad. I will tell you, it is a little hard to see. I will admit that, but you'll also see that you register your vote. Yes, sir.
Are the clickers tied to the individual person, or is it just a vote? So does it register that me by my name?
You have a clicker assigned to
It's a
you.
number.
Yeah, a number. So we have,
Get the same number.
like, for instance, I'm holding 275. Is that going to be mine?
That's an extra.
No. Okay. Won't be mine.
I'm not gonna tell anybody.
And I'm only an at-large member, by the way, so I only vote if there's a tie. Please, no tie. No tie. That's too much pressure on me. But you will have the same clicker device assigned to you. That is yours as long as you're a town meeting member. But you do turn them in after each session. So you're not.
Registered who voted.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think we kind of got, I think I've already said that, that you can, again, it's your last vote that counts. So. All right. Mary Lou, So we're really fortunate to have the A team in the town clerk's office. And Mary Lou's just going to take you through a few things to know before, during, and after town meeting.
Okay. So I give the same speech every year. I know a lot of you wouldn't, but there are some new town meeting members here too. And congratulations to everybody that got re-elected and newly elected town meeting members. Actually, we lowered the quorum this year. It was the first year. That's why everybody had a rerun. And I can tell you that we filled every district except one, and we're only missing 5 town meeting members. So that's really good. That was a great idea that we did that. So,
Was it District 5, Mary Lou, that didn't fill?
right. But they're only missing 5 people. So that's not too bad. We had a lot of write-in campaigns, and they were great write-in campaigns because we still needed people. So we were able to fill every district, which was great, except for District 5. But that's okay. So my office sent out packets about 2 weeks ago, and I'm so sorry that you didn't receive yours, but it had the term letter in it. It had a indicating the length of the term that you got re-elected, that you got in for, not re-elected, but the term of that you got in for, 1, 2, or 3. It also had an email form, and we've gotten really good responses with the email forms. We have extra forms at the office, or I will bring some extras. And that's because we do send a lot of emails out, you know, before and during and after town meeting every once in a while. So it's good to give us all time, you know, email addresses and stuff. It also had a letter explaining the procedure. If anybody moves out of town or moves within a district, what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to notify me if you move within a district, but you'll continue to serve in that district until the next town election. If you move out of town, then obviously you don't serve at all. But it's good to know that because it keeps track, we can keep track of where people are and where people have gone and different things like that. And then also it told you to go click the link on the website, as Gerri mentioned. It has the link for the town meeting bylaws, the town bylaws, and the charter, which is, they're all on that town meeting website. So it's all there. So I'm sorry if anybody didn't get it. Hopefully everybody did. I think everybody, I mean, from the response we've had coming in the office, everybody seems to have gotten everything we've sent out so far. And there's also a letter in there that explains how you can come into the office to get sworn in if you are a new town meeting member or an existing town meeting member. If you can't, I do a swearing in ceremony before town meeting on the 12th. I'll do that. So it's not necessary if you can't get into the office. That's fine. So when you come into town meeting, when it starts on the 12th, there's 3 tables in the hallway that split up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So whatever district you're in, look ahead at the signs that we have posted. Just go right to that table. And my staff will check you in. You just give them your name. They will give you, they'll check you in on the poll pad that we use for the attendance. They'll give you a pink attendance card. What you're going to do is sign your name next to the date on the attendance card. And when you go into the auditorium, there'll be a policeman standing at the doorway. Give him your card because he has a clicker that he keeps track of how many people we have. That's how we get our quorum. We know when we have a quorum. So make sure that you do sign the card and you sign it next to the date and give it to the policeman on the way in. And then you will get, you also get a town meeting badge. Just very basic, says town meeting on it. It's good. You need the badge in order to be able to vote, as well as you're going to get the clicker as well. But make sure you have your badge as well too, because that's how Gerri can tell, or Madam Moderator, I'm sorry, can tell that, you know, who's town meeting member and who isn't and stuff. And we ask you to all kind of sit down in the front section, as most people can. And then you also get from my staff, they'll give you the clicker that's associated with your name and you'll have your number. That's how we keep track of it. Everybody's going to have the same number for the whole year until we have another election, and then we'll just issue new numbers next year. So you'll get that. At the end of the night, or if you have to leave the auditorium for anything during the meeting, when you go out, make sure that you give the clicker to somebody that's in my staff sitting at the table. And then when you're ready to go back in, they'll give it back to you. Don't walk around with it. Don't, you know, go outside with it or anything else.
And
Just the way we can
don't
keep
give
track.
it to your seatmate to
Right.
vote for.
Exactly.
either.
Exactly. So just keep it with you at all times and stuff. And then when you go back in, you know, like my staff will give it right back to you and stuff. At the end of the night, there'll be 2 people from either Marcy or Emily or Tricia will be at the end of the hallway. Pass your clickers and your badges back. They'll have big boxes that they'll be holding. So just throw them in there and don't leave with the clickers or the badges. So much easier because we'll put them together the next day. Where my office is responsible for sending out all the information for town meeting, all the yellow sheets, all the warrants. Hopefully everybody's got theirs already so far. The annual town meeting warrant is in your budget book. That's why you didn't get it in the mail specifically. That's in the budget book. But the other two warrants should have come. They should have gotten 3 yellow sheets, 2 warrants that came in a mailing last week. And there'll be handouts if we do have extra copies made, but if you've already gotten like all the yellow sheets and stuff, they'll be in the inner lobby when you go into the auditorium downstairs. There's an inner lobby, there'll be a big table. If anybody has any new handouts that they want to pass out, they can call us, we can bring them, or you can come early and bring them and leave them on the tables. And they'll be all the handouts will be on the tables outside of the main auditorium. And let's see, currently we have 256 town meeting members. The total we need is 261, but 257 with Gerri as a Madam Moderator. And then the quorum is going to be 130 people. So we can't start until we actually have 130 people in the meeting. Yes, Debbie.
Do we have to, if we want to put a handout on the table, do we ask Madam Moderator or yourself
Yes,
before?
yes.
All right, great. Yeah. Hopefully the handouts, most of the handouts that we put on the tables are all related to the articles that we're going to be talking about most of the time. All right. Anybody have any questions? Great.
No, somebody.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, if I wanted to find out more information about one of the articles for the May 15th meeting, but I didn't really want to tie up town meeting to have a conversation to understand one of the warrants better, do I just reach out to the different departments or people? Like, how would I go find out even more than what's on the other sheet about something like the flood plan overlay district?
You can call me.
I mean,
Yeah, recall,
You can always
yeah,
call my office for any of the land use
Right.
articles. We'd be more than happy to talk to you anytime.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
and Sarah will be talking in a few minutes also
About the
when she does
land use
land
articles.
use 101.
If anybody has any questions, call my office. You know, well, if I can't get the answer, I'll find somebody that can. All right.
Thank you,
Great.
Marilla.
Thank you.
All right, quickly, we're going to get to Maya in 1 second. The role of the selectmen, people may ask this. I'm really, really sad that Tony is unable to be here tonight. Because normally he talks about the fact that once town meeting starts, the moderator is the boss. I mean, it's the only time he will say that I am actually the boss of anything. And somehow, based on him, like, doing one of these bits, I wonder if I really am the boss, but it is actually true. Once town meeting starts, the moderator is, and I don't want to say I'm the boss, but, my role is to facilitate town meeting. The selectmen do not have more power than the FinCom, than the school committee, than the planning board or whatever. It's everybody is equal footing, and the moderator is going to direct things. The selectmen beforehand, though, do a couple of things. They will set the meeting dates and times. The one exception is by our bylaw, the annual town meeting date is a part of our bylaws, so that is not a decision to be made, but they will determine special town meetings, they'll determine the start time, and they'll also determine what's going to be on the warrant. And again, you will see when the selectmen vote on warrants, they may not approve certain articles to go on the warrant, or they, but that's their right to do it as selectmen. And then the other thing is, Mary Lou just talked about the yellow sheets. The yellow sheets are produced by the Board of Selectmen and voted on by them as reference material for you to utilize. All right, that brings us to the Finance Commission, and we're very fortunate to have the chair of the FinCom, Maya Bodenhofer, here. Question, Mr.
I have
O'Connor?
one question in reference to the actual town meeting. Let's get to it. So we have slides that are up on the screen, and then we also have these written. Which ones are we actually voting on? Because sometimes there are differences in wording.
Yeah, and that when I talked before about the difference between the article and the motion is what you're voting on. So the motion is always going to be up on the screen. That's what you're going to see. The article may have more detail in it, some other detail, but it's going to pertain, the motion is going to pertain to the article. You vote on a motion. You don't vote on an article. You don't vote on a PowerPoint presentation either, by the way. But that's what you're voting on.
Thank you.
Cool. That's advances.
Okay. So like Jerry, I can also use the microphone when I'm standing up. I'm the chair of the Finance Commission, and our role by charter is to advise town meeting. We are responsible for reporting on the overall financial health of the town, for analyzing any financially related requests, any warrant articles. And you can think of the warrant article like an agenda, right? So the agenda is, so anything on that agenda, any of those articles that are financially related, it's FinCom's responsibility to analyze that, do the due diligence, and make a recommendation. Obviously, as town meeting members, you guys are all also encouraged to do your own due diligence on things, but it's our responsibility to do that and present that information to you. And it's also our responsibility to actually make the motion on any financially related article at town meeting. Okay. So we, along with Jeff O'Neill's office, annually come up with a budget book. So I encourage you to look at the budget book. I know it's like an inch thick. There's a lot of information in here. I have a letter at the beginning, and then Tony has a letter at the beginning, and then you start to get into a dashboard and trends. These are the important things that we think we would like all town meeting members to look at, to understand before we go into voting on the budget. And then this also includes all the detail for the budget. And as Mary Lou mentioned, this includes the warrant for the annual town meeting, which is where we are voting on the operating budget for the next fiscal year. I don't know what was covered on Monday night about in the municipal 101, but I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but town works on a fiscal year. We start on July 1, we go through June 30th. The fiscal year is numbered according to the number at the end of the fiscal year. So we are currently in FY25, and we will be voting on FY26, which will start July 1. So everything you see in the book is all related to those. All those numbers are fiscal years. I think I got everything there. So this is an example of what the budget book looks like. As I said, we're going to be voting on FY26. So if you look on the far right column, that is the FY26 request. That is the recommendation from the Finance Commission based on the request from general government, from the schools, from facilities, and then all of the shared costs that we have, things like health insurance and pension and all those costs. The column just to the left of that says FY25 budget. The reason we only have the budget number there is because we're still in the middle of FY25. So we haven't yet completed that. All we can tell you about this current year, which is the year previous to what we're voting on, is what we approved last year. But then for prior years before that, you have the actual numbers there. So you can see trends over time that we present 22, 23, 24 actuals, 25 budget, and 26 request. Just to mention that the school budget is our largest budget item. It's about $65 million for this upcoming year. That is the town appropriation to the schools. The schools also get additional money from the state from a program called the Special Education Circuit Breaker. They get additional funds from the federal government, the Title I grants, the Title III grants, things like that. All of those grants are also added to the schools to support the school budget. So it's not, the schools are not completely supported by town budget, but town budget is a huge percentage of the school budget. By state law, the town meeting can only vote on the bottom line budget. The school committee has full authority to spend that money as they wish within and move money around in their budget. Is there a question?
What impact is the budget, gonna have because of Trump cutting funding? You said all this stuff's included, but is it really going to be included given what's been happening in Washington?
I would love to know the answer to that question, right? I think we all would love to know the answer to that question. For the coming fiscal year, the schools are reasonably confident that the Title I funding, that the Title III funding will be coming through. Those are all governed by statute. That's not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not something that anybody gets to vote and choose on. It's something that's set by statute, and there are formulas that apply. But we are concerned about how the schools, actually, we're concerned about how general government may be impacted by federal changes as well, but especially the schools. Yeah. Yes, Cheryl.
Can I ask you a question on something? I've been watching the school committee meetings, Lord knows why, but I have. And one of the board members made the remark that they had, that there was extra free cash. And then they were like discussing it. Now, mind you, this was in the last month on what to spend it on. If you have extra free cash, shouldn't it be turned back to the town instead of looking for something to spend it on? Or is there a reason for it?
Okay, so I just want to clarify some language here. So free cash has a very specific meaning with regard to municipal finance, right? And that refers to at the end of a fiscal year, there is money typically that's available, either free cash from the previous year that rolls over or unspent budgeted money, things like where we spend less than we budgeted, or where revenues come in higher than we anticipated, right? And then at the end of the fiscal year, Jeff's office works really hard, puts together all this information, submits it to the state. The state then certifies our official free cash. And so that happens typically in October-ish. And last year, we had a really large amount of free cash. It was certified at $29.8 million. We talked about that at Fall Town Meeting. Previews of coming attractions, I'm going to talk about it again a week from Monday. That money, so that's the official free cash. But I think maybe that's not exactly what you're asking about. You're asking about if the schools have some line items in their budget where they spent less than they anticipated. They have the full ability to move money around within their budget and reallocate it to something else. Because, I mean, we can talk about exactly why the state law is such as it is. I think that the justification for that is that the schools have to be able to react to any student who shows up and says, I just moved to town, I'm enrolling today, and you have to accommodate them immediately. And so the schools need to have that flexibility in their budget. But because they have that flexibility in the budget, most school districts throughout the Commonwealth do not return unspent budgeted money to free cash. And instead, they find other ways to use it. Oftentimes, when they made their budget the previous year, there was something that they trimmed back because they thought they needed to do something. And so then when they find that, you know, a teacher was left and they replaced them with a newer teacher who was making less money, there's a little bit of money available. Maybe that money can now be spent on the textbooks that they wanted or something like that. So that's their responsibility as school committee members. In the last 9 years or so, there have been a few times that the schools have returned money to free cash. And that was when there was sort of a specific agreement about that. You might remember that a couple of years back, we were really struggling to get vans for special education transportation. And because we couldn't purchase the vans, we were having to use a lot of contractors and services instead of our own internal people. And so the school committee came to town meeting in that fall, I think, and said, we need some extra money because we had this plan to buy buses. We have money to buy vans, but there are no vans to be had because of all the supply chain problems. And so they asked for additional money, but they said, we want, I don't remember exactly what the number was, but say it was $300,000. We want $300,000 so we have this buffer. But we promise you, if we don't need all of this money, we will give it back at the end of the year. And that's what wound up happening. They gave a good chunk of it back at the end of the year because they didn't need as much as they thought they might.
And it's given back, where does it go?
So what happens is it gets unspent. And then at the end of June 30th, when the accounts close, I think they close a couple weeks later, but effective June 30th, then whatever money remains unspent in school budget, general government budget, that would then roll into free cash the following fall. That's the source of free cash.
And any part of the town government and schools can use that free cash or request that free cash to cover budget items?
So free cash, once it's been certified, can be allocated by town meeting. But it can only be allocated by town meeting. In order for it to be allocated by town meeting, there are several steps. So first, the Board of Selectmen would have to vote to put it on the warrant, put an article on the warrant to spend it. And then the Finance Commission would make a recommendation. And then we would make a motion at town meeting, and then town meeting can vote it up or down. Or you can amend it, the motion and things like that as well. All right, I don't want to get us we're supposed to be focused on town meeting, so I don't want to get us too far off on free cash, but are there any other questions? Okay.
Picture the pink sheet.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Madam Moderator mentioned that there is a yellow sheet that is put out by the Board of Selectmen. FinCom puts out a pink sheet. We will be voting on the official pink sheet for this year's town meeting tomorrow night at our FinCom meeting, and then it will be mailed out to you on Friday, so you should have it the week before town meeting. And that shows our recommendation of what we are recommending for all the special town meeting articles. This book shows you everything we're recommending for the operating budget. So we don't put all of this information again in the pink sheet, but for example, the general government and the schools together are asking for, I think it's $150,000 for a new human resources module to be used for in our Munis system to streamline operations for both general government and the schools. Something on the town meeting, special town meeting 1. That article will be discussed at town meeting 1, special town meeting 1. Then FinCom will make a motion to allocate free cash to cover that cost, and then the body will make a vote on that. We'll deliberate and then vote. All right. So this is what the pink sheet typically looks like. You'll be able to follow along, and it shows information about the total amount of free cash and money in some stabilization funds and things like that, if we're adding money to stabilization fund or taking money from stabilization fund. Okay.
That's it. Any questions on either what the Mary Lou brought up, Maya had brought up, or I brought up as part of town meeting 101? And there'll be time for questions at the very end also, before we bring up someone who's taller who's going to talk about land use 101. All right, looks like we're all good. Nothing online, right? Okay, awesome. All right, so we've got two people that are taller than myself, and Mary Lou. We've got Sarah Dixon, who is our Director of Community Planning. And I guess our building commissioner is gonna, he's providing, so he's the phone a friend, right?
So how do we use this clicker?
That advances.
Perfect.
All right,
All right, great.
Sarah Dixon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Dixon. I'm the Director of Community Development. It's great to see you all here. Thank you for serving on town meeting. It's such an important role in the town. I wanted to be able to kick off just with a general overview of land use in the town of Norwood and give you some familiarity if you're new to this group about how land use works in the town, how it's enforced, and what role you may play as a town meeting member in that. There are regulatory boards and staff departments that work on land use. One is the building department. Gary Pelletier is our building commissioner. He heads up a group of inspectors that enforce the building code, but also our zoning bylaw, which is our regulatory document that sorts out what land uses are permissible in what parts of town and under what conditions. So Gary and his team are responsible for enforcing the building code, but also the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw is, I wish I had a copy of it with me. It's a rather substantial and dry document that divides the town into various districts. And like I said, it kind of organizes all of our uses accordingly. Yeah, so the bylaw has a whole lot of different sections talking about different types of special regulations. Kind of the meat and potatoes of it are a table of uses and the table of dimensional requirements. The dimensional requirements relate to structures, your setbacks, right, where your home can be relative to your lot lines on your property. Building height, those are your dimensional requirements. The uses are how we organize uses throughout town. Zoning and planning as an industry kind of came about at the turn of the century to try to protect people from industry and factories that were spouting up at that time and spewing all sorts of noxious odors and gases around. So the idea was to protect public health. Obviously, it's a lot more nuanced today, but the same principle still applies, right? Making sure that we have commercial uses in appropriate districts and residential uses in areas where that's protected as well. So we also follow fairly strictly the state's zoning act. So our zoning bylaw is compliant with the zoning act, but in Massachusetts, we are able to enact local zoning that goes kind of above and beyond the state's zoning requirements. We covered most of this. Generally, this is an example of what our zoning map looks like. The more districts we add, the more of a rainbow kaleidoscope it becomes. But we have business districts, and we also have different types of residential districts. And in each of these districts, the dimensional requirements and the uses that are permissible are different. This is an example of the use table. You can see every column represents a different district in town, and then every row represents a different use. The use table is extensive. It does not capture every possible use, and we do find that as our town evolves and changes, there are uses that become contemplated that are not in our zoning bylaw. Zoning bylaw is I would say it's a dynamic document. It's evolving and changing. It has to change along with our community to reflect our needs. I can give you an example of uses that maybe that have come along over time. Urgent care facilities is a good example of one that's kind of come before Gary's desk and my desk in recent years. Our table of uses, talks about hospitals and it talks about doctors' offices, but urgent care is kind of a newer use, right? How do we fit that into our bylaw? Same thing with like permanent makeup. The closest thing we have is a tattoo as a potential use, right? The body art establishments. So we can't list every possible use here, but we do try to capture and cover the different types of uses that might come up in town. And
Having had to go through old zoning bylaws, looking at pages 12 and 13, which has some of this information, why isn't there a legend to tell you what these letters and abbreviations mean?
that's a good question. I think there is a description at some point in there, but I can tell you right now what they are.
Yeah,
So-
there is a legend. in
There's a legend at the very beginning, I think, of the table of uses.
Yes, yes.
In the articles?
Not in the articles,
Yeah,
no.
it would be helpful if there would be one.
Thanks for the suggestion. So where the row and the column meet to determine whether a use is allowed in a particular district, you've got Y for yes, it's allowed, no, it's not allowed. PB, which means it's allowed with a special permit from the planning board. BA, which means it's allowed via special permit from the zoning board of appeals. And then there are numbers that you may see that correspond to specific footnotes, which come after the table, which sometimes gives special circumstances or parameters relative to that particular use in that spot.
You also need to know the headings. Like I know LM is limited manufacturing,
Right.
only because I've been familiar, but that should have been in here.
Yeah. So in the zoning bylaw section 2 does list all of the acronyms for the different zoning districts. But yes, I agree. There's a lot here to look at, and more as time goes on. And this is the table of dimensional requirements. Again, it functions similarly in that you've got rows for various dimensional requirements, and then the columns are the different districts. How do we enact new zoning? So typically the planning board is the regulatory body that advances new zoning proposals with assistance from my department, the Community Development Department. We work together over the year to think about ways that the zoning bylaw does need modification to reflect the changing needs of our community. The board will do research. It will discuss in open session throughout the year proposed zoning changes. Once it has a proposed change, it will hold public hearings on those changes and then submit them to the Board of Selectmen and request that they be placed on the warrant for town meeting. Once it is placed on the warrant and comes before you all, planning board is also responsible for making a formal recommendation to town meeting about whether or not they support that article. But ultimately, the deciding factor on whether or not our zoning bylaw is changed is up to all of you. Most zoning amendments require a 2/3 majority in order to be accepted and adopted. There are certain changes, mostly relative to housing development, that only require a simple majority, and that's a fairly recent change by state law. So after town meeting votes to accept a zoning change, then there's still one more step. Mary Lou's office works pretty closely with my department, and we submit a package of materials to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General has to sign off on every municipality's zoning changes before they can come into effect. So it is a lot of responsibility for town meeting, and it's a long road. So changing zoning is not something that happens quickly. It's something that has to involve a lot of thought by a lot of people before it actually goes into place. Once it's adopted into our zoning bylaw and it's in effect, that's where Gerri comes into the picture. His team is responsible for enforcement to make sure that the structures that are constructed in town and the uses that are pursued at individual properties townwide are in full compliance with the zoning bylaw. And that happens through approval of building permits, inspection of the projects. If you are a resident who has a complaint or you'd like to request enforcement on a perceived violation, again, it's Gerri that you would email and request some follow-up and more information on that as well. Gerri's office also has the ability to issue fines and compel compliance with the zoning bylaw. So just to kind of go back and introduce you again to the planning board. The planning board is a 5-member elected board. We do have a 6th associate member that attends all of the meetings and is positioned to serve in the case of an absence on a special permit application. One of their primary roles in this context is developing planning policy and putting together proposed zoning amendments, but also our strategic and long-term planning. I'll do a little plug. We're in the middle of our comprehensive plan, which is a 10-year document, kind of visioning for Norwood's future. I have extras of these right here. If you'd like to participate, we still have our survey is still open, and we have lots of other engagement materials. So please grab one of these on your way if you haven't done that already. But that's the planning board's, that's their area of expertise. They also meet every 2 weeks to review permitting applications. So subdivision applications, special permits when it's specified in the zoning bylaw that a project requires planning board review, site plan approvals and major projects all receive the benefit of review by the planning board. The Zoning Board of Appeals is another one of the regulatory boards that works on land use. It's a 5-member board also. It's appointed by the Board of Selectmen. They hear and decide applications mostly for special permits. They are the variance granting authority. A variance is another form of zoning relief in addition to a special permit. Where if an applicant is seeking some sort of an exception to the dimensional requirements of the bylaw, they do have the ability to ask for that special relief in the form, usually of a variance, sometimes in the special permit, depending on what it is and whether or not the bylaw allows for a special permit to be an option for that relief. But there are 2 different forms of relief with different varying degrees of requirements that go along with them. The Zoning Board of Appeals also can hear appeals if anybody wants to appeal a determination by usually our building official.
That's the question because you just brought it up about the difference between a variance and special permit. Article 8 for the non-conforming uses speaks specifically to that difference.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just curious if the increase in floor area from 25 to 75% would impact something like height, setback, or lot coverage, or do they still have to go for the variance if that 75% increase goes over a certain limit and back to us?
That's a great question. Let's talk a little bit more about that article when we get to it, but just for right now, so put a pin on it, because that's kind of the meat and potatoes of that article. But I think it's a good point that talking a little bit more specifically about the difference between a special permit and a variance might be useful for this group. So a variance, and each of these are defined by state law. So this isn't kind of a Norwood invention, so to speak. We get to decide when special permits may be appropriate for the most part, but what a variance is and the legal thresholds that it requires are more or less derived from the state's Zoning Act 40A. So a variance is kind of the higher form of zoning relief. Higher thresholds, they're more rarely and infrequently issued. They really are intended to be the kind of most unusual qualified exceptions to the zoning bylaw. They are not available for uses. They are only available for dimensional requirements. And the threshold requirements for a variance, you have to be able to establish that there's something so unique about the lot or structures on your lot that literal enforcement of the bylaw on your proposal would render some sort of severe hardship. Most applications, when they're trying to construct an addition within the rear setback or build a structure that's taller than is required, most properties can't get over that uniqueness hurdle. Some can, right? And that's why that avenue exists for those extenuating circumstances. But a variance, it's a tough ask. Special permits are far more discretionary. The big question that the zoning board or the planning board, depending on the circumstance, that they have to get to yes on is this substantially more detrimental to the town generally or the neighborhood specifically than what's there already? And our bylaw includes a series of criteria that kind of break that down a little bit. Is it visually compatible? Are there positive social, community, and economic benefits? Is there a fiscal impact to the town? Traffic and circulation, so on and so forth. But it kind of all boils down to that. Is this substantially more detrimental? That is a little bit more discretionary. And typically, both of these, when they're reviewed by the planning board or the ZBA, they do involve a public hearing where members of the public can come and speak in favor of or against, or even just to ask questions. The boards can consider those comments. Typically, they're far more relevant for a special permit because it's a little bit more subjective, right? Is this more detrimental? The variance less so. Variances can only be granted by the ZBA. And I'll move on to the section 5.4 changes when we get to the articles. Yes, sir.
Norwood Housing Authority, how does that relate to town government? It seems to be like a completely separate thing.
It's not completely, but it's mostly separate. So they're a quasi-governmental agency. If we're the policymakers, think of them as a landlord. They own and operate their own portfolio of housing for a specific purpose, for a specific population that's income qualified. They also administer voucher programs. So they're much more of a program operator. They have their own budget and they're staffed separately from the town, but they are considered a kind of a quasi-public agency.
Correct. They report, who do they answer to?
So public housing authorities have their own reporting structure. They're audited by the state. They kind of report to the state or the federal government, depending on the funding that they're using for their programs. And most housing authorities have a mix of both state and federal programs, and they report to those entities appropriately. All right. And Conservation Commission is kind of the third regulatory board in the Community Development Department that operates with land use, less associated with any of the zoning amendments that you may see as a town meeting member, but they enforce the state's Wetland Protection Act and also our local wetland bylaw. They're a 5-member appointed board as well. Conservation Commission is unique in that they also have a land management function. So they own a portfolio of conservation properties around town, and they're responsible for maintaining those properties. Okay, so we covered most of these definitions. Special permits and variances, I think we've covered that. Subdivision plans, that's a type of application that the planning board is responsible for reviewing. That's when you divide a large piece of land into multiple lots. Usually you see those as residential subdivisions, but there can be commercial subdivisions as well. They always include the creation of a roadway in that process. An approval not required plan is another type of plan that the planning board can approve. That does not involve the creation of a roadway, but it does split, essentially divide or aggregate lots in compliance with the size requirements of the bylaw. Site plan approval, again, that's a planning board application. It's a more technical review of commercial development to make sure that a larger project is complying with all the technical requirements of the bylaw. So things like stormwater management and drainage, lighting, landscaping, and of course, all of the dimensional requirements in the zoning bylaw. Major project is a type of special permit for especially large projects. Conservation Commission issues order of conditions and notices of intent, as well as process a request for determination applications relative to work that's contemplated within proximity of the protected wetland areas. Okay. To the articles. I'll take a brief reprieve and then I think I'm.
Yeah. Any other questions for Sarah on land use? And she will be back in a few minutes when we get to the zoning articles. We're going to move on. If no questions,
I'll come to my.
we'll go right into the special town meeting. Mike, you want to?
Sure. So, hi, everybody. So we thought we would wrap up, tonight's information session by going through the 10 warrant articles for special town meeting number 2. This is the meeting that, if you look at your yellow sheet, is, and warrant is called for May 15th at 6:30 PM. So we are anticipating that we're going to get to this warrant on the second night of town meetings. If town meeting agrees that night will be we'll see if we get it done in 2 nights. We never know. The first article, and actually while we go through these 10 articles, you might see a couple of us staff switch in and out depending on who sort of owns these articles. And the first article is actually related to the moderator's term. And would you like to take this one, Madam Moderator?
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'll be happy
You got
to.
it, boss. All right.
And just procedurally, as Mike said, so what will happen the first night of town meeting on May 12th at 6:30 sharp, because I know everyone will be ready to go and we'll have a quorum. We will open the annual town meeting, and then I will entertain a motion from the Board of Selectmen to adjourn the annual town meeting, and we will open up the first special town meeting. The reason that we do that, and you'll hear me explain it that night as well, but you should know this in advance, is because the articles that are on the special town meeting number 1 pertain to money that could affect decisions on the annual town meeting. So we do that business first to take care of that before we begin the annual town meeting. We'll then go through that special town meeting. We will take as much time as we need, as the body wants, to debate and vote. We will then reopen the annual town meeting. We will then, once we get through the annual town meeting, and again, I think it's highly unlikely we will finish annual town meeting that first night. So more than likely we will adjourn until Thursday. Thursday, we will reopen the annual town meeting. We may at some point, and actually we don't have to, and this is a little bit of a procedural thing. We don't have to necessarily open that special town meeting before we finish the annual town meeting. And once we finish the annual town meeting, we will open the second special town meeting. Second special town meeting is what we're talking about now. The first article up there is an article to change the term of the moderator from 1 year to 3 years. So currently, the term of the moderator, the only elected position in town that is less than 3 years, is 1 year. This particular article will not only take a approval of town meeting, a majority approval of town meeting, but because the term of the moderator is part of the special act to establish Norwood's town meeting, representative town meeting, it also will need to go to the legislature for approval. Just to let you know that because this obviously concerns me as the moderator, I will be appointing a temporary moderator who will moderate this article rather than me doing that, in order to make sure that A, I can speak on it if I want to, and B, to make sure that it's above reproach, especially in light of the fact that it does have to go to the legislature for approval. So the reason that we're recommending this is twofold. One, I can tell you now, I will be starting my 3rd year as town moderator. And having been through that experience, I can tell you, as former moderators can, there is a pretty steep learning curve. this is, some folks may think that I just walk in and, I'm hosting a talk show. Far from it. The amount of preparation, the amount of knowledge that is needed, not only of mass general law, but as Sarah was just talking about, of zoning laws, Massachusetts zoning laws, state statutes, our own town bylaws, is extensive. So to really have the full power of really knowledge, it can't be done in 1 year. And also another reason behind it is, thinking about others that may be interested in running for moderator. It's a bit of just doing it for a year is a bit of a turn off. Second reason is just from an efficiency standpoint too. There is administrative work that has to be done for the moderator. Think about it from the clerk's office. Every year, the moderator now currently has to go out and get 50 signatures plus. They all have to be certified by the town clerk's office. There's campaign finance paperwork that has to be filled out at all. Anyone who's run for office knows all of that stuff. So it does create an efficiency, but more importantly, it's really about the knowledge that is necessary. Towns, right now, the majority of towns that have town meeting, the term is 3 years. It is above 50%. There are more and more towns that are beginning to move in that direction too. I'm going to show you a slide in a second of several communities. And then the Mass Moderators Association is also recommending that towns adopt 3-year terms. Some of the reasons for the 1-year term, the Commonwealth allows either a 1 or a 3-year term. The history of the 1-year term is town meeting, which is a form of government that goes back to the 1600s in this country. So even before we became the United States of America, many times the role of the moderator was elected at town meeting, not elected by the community, just elected by whoever shows up for town meeting. And the moderator would serve for the term of that particular town meeting, which was a year. So that's where that's the origin story of it, if you will. So the selectmen have agreed to put this on the warrant. It will be up to town meeting to decide. And again, so you can see the surrounding area, what we're looking at. I will note that on the 1-year, Canton and Westwood are both open town meeting towns. I think Millis is too. Jeff, you remember? No. It is, okay. So, again, the looking more to 3 years. Yeah.
Does everybody know what an open town meeting is as opposed to what we have with district? I didn't know this until my cousin explained it to me.
Yeah. So I think I talked about it a little bit earlier. Representative town meetings are elected representatives from each voting district. So you're actually elected. Open town meeting, any registered voter in a town can come and show up and vote at an open town meeting. And again, the difference, you have a fluctuation in attendance, as you might imagine, big time in open town meetings. Some towns have actual issues with getting people to even show up if there's nothing really controversial that they're voting on. So that's a big difference there. Yes, sir.
Does the article contain term limits?
No, I don't believe that any of our offices in the town of Norwood have term limits. And one of the things I do want to throw this out, because I do know that, a rebuttal to this potentially could be, well, what if the moderator, pardon my French, sucks, is really bad? Just like any other officer in town, elected officer in town, you can recall any position in this town, and the town has the right to do that. So, good question. Any other? All right, I finally get to stop talking.
All right. Okay, so Article 2 addresses the, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Article 2 proposes a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with Tangent Development LLC. So Tangent Development is looking to build and operate solar panels on the town's landfill. Obviously, the town owns that land. And working with the light department, they've put together a proposal to purchase the generated power at a discounted rate and enhancing the town's green energy portfolio. They've requested to do what's called a payment in lieu of taxes agreement, which is a practice for solar facilities in Massachusetts. We've actually done it once before with the MBTA lot. There's solar panels there as well, so the town has done this before. And it's pretty common to replace property taxes. Again, since we own the land, they wouldn't be charged property taxes, but we are taxing them in a way on the equipment that they're putting on the land. So this agreement has to adhere to the Department of Revenue guidelines. Oh, okay, good. Basing payments on the full and fair cash value of the solar equipment, excluding the town-owned land. So what this proposed agreement does is it looks to charge them almost $500,000, $481,000, which is sort of spread out over 25 years of the length of the agreement. So this was negotiated by the light department with Tangent Development. I'll see if I can answer the questions. I'm not the light department, but yes.
I have solar in my house. What is the rate that you're gonna purchase the solar for?
Okay, that I'll have to get back to you. I'll write it down and
And then does this now open it up for solar companies to come in to Norwood, which they have not been allowed to do before, to homeowners and install? Because right now I'm paying off still the loan on the solar plus a maintenance fee.
so I don't, just in my own opinion, I don't think it's going to be any different than how the MBTA lot was done when they did that a couple of years ago. So I don't think it will open up the doors to any other like floodgate. I will find out about the rate that they're purchasing at. It sounds like it's a more favorable rate because it's, you're using the, oh, there's a hand up. I don't know if they're helping me out here, but, but yeah, they're getting at a discounted rate. I'm not sure, is the hand that's up online, do you know the answer or who's that?
Ed Farrell.
Oh, Ed, do you know?
Yeah, sorry, no, I don't know the answer, but I do have another question.
Okay, well, okay, 1 second. We have one more person in the room. We'll get to you next.
Sorry, three quick questions. First, is there any other potential use for that land that the solar panels are going on? Or is it pretty much not useful?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, who's responsible for the maintenance of the actual property, the grounds? Not, it says the equipment that the company will be responsible for the maintenance, but who's responsible for the grounds?
Okay, if it, I'll find out. I mean, I'll write down your questions.
They're gonna maintain it.
They are,
They
okay.
had, like mowing the grass inside the
Yeah.
fence, they went.
The Tangent will?
Okay, and then when their contract ends or if they disband or something happens to the company, are they also going to be responsible as a contract that they will remove any equipment from the property when they are done and gone?
Okay, so it's a good question. I don't think that the contract itself is done and dusted yet. This is just, gets us to the table to negotiate. It needs town meetings approval so that we can go to the table. So that's something that, I know this is being recorded, so we can definitely go back and make sure that these are all addressed. But yeah, that's something that we can make sure is in the contract.
Mike,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mike, I just, in answer to the question I was asked about, it's in your yellow sheet. The Norwood Municipal Light Department has negotiated an agreement to purchase the power generated from this project at a discounted rate.
Yeah, I want to know what the rate is.
Yeah.
I want the same reimbursement that they're getting.
Okay, I think Ed, then Debbie. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was looking at that and I can't find Tangent Development LLC registered anywhere. And I can find no information on the company. The only thing that's publicly posted about them is the fact that they were involved with another company, Capital Dynamics, for the North Kingston job down in Rhode Island.
Okay, I can find out, again, I'll talk to the light department. Obviously, they've been negotiating, they know them, but I'm not them. Sorry, I don't have a better answer to that. I know that they have a representative that they've been negotiating with Ed.
Yeah, I'd appreciate any information on the company because, well, going into a project like this, it's nice to have a company that you have some information on. You know, if they're owned, know who owns them. If they're a holding company, know the fact that they're a holding company.
Yeah, we could probably have a slide for town meeting that addresses that. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Sure.
Did this go out to bid?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. They're not here tonight, so I'll find out. Debbie?
So it's town land, DPW does the maintenance.
Currently, I mean, it's the landfill, so they're putting it, yes, the DPW owns the maintenance, yes.
Okay, so we've got a bladder in there that we can't put anything up there, we can't plant a tree, we can't. So how are they going to stabilize, the panels? I mean, will they tell us? all
They're
that?
ground mounted.
Huh?
They're just ground mounted, so they're not screwed into the ground. They just sit on the ground on the racks with a ballast system that holds them in place. So they're not gonna penetrate the top of the landfill. They're actually not gonna disturb the surface of the ground on the landfill. These are basically racks that are
And
placed.
the weight of them keeps them. from
Correct.
moving
They're
around?
very, very similar to what you'd see them on the side of the highway. Large ground mounted solar fields.
Okay, so DPW is not gonna be responsible for cutting the lawn under the
Not
solar
not
panel?
inside the fence. No, they have to maintain. I was in multiple meetings about
Well, I
this.
wasn't, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
the question.
so the ground's inside the fence. The only one that has access to it is the company.
Even though
They
it's-
maintain their own equipment and maintain the grounds underneath their equipment. Because it's electrified equipment, so that's their gig.
All right, and they'll tell us when we get more information on how many square foot it is, what part they're taking up.
I mean,
of
it went through the ZBA and the Concom. So there's plans available that can show you the whole size.
Okay.
And the proposed array.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay. All right. Yes.
Do they have multiple projects, do you recall, that they currently operate?
That I don't know.
We'll find out. Okay. We'll have answers to these obviously for town meeting. So thank you for bringing these up now so we can get them answered. Moving on to the next two articles, we're going to look at them together. And these are acceptance of two clauses from the recently adopted HERO Act. The HERO Act is Chapter 178 of the Act of 2024. They introduced local options for increased veteran property tax exemptions in Massachusetts, and they do require town meeting approval to do so. There's two clauses, 22I and 22J, both build upon each other. We're recommending that they be passed as a package unit, but obviously it's going to take two articles to do that, so we have to do them separate motions. So 22I allows for an annual cost of living adjustment to the veteran property tax, the current veteran property tax exemption, but mirrors adjustments for senior exemptions and impacts approximately 203 veterans in town. 22J provides an additional optional exemption up to 100% of the existing veteran exemption amount, offering further tax relief to approximately 65 more Norwood veterans with specific limitations on reducing tax liability. So is that okay, Derek? Do you want to come down and do you want to add anything to that? Okay, Derek, our Veteran Service Affairs Director, is here. Just if there's any specific questions about this, but we did the analysis on this, and if we implement both clauses 22I and 22J, it's estimated to have a fiscal impact of approximately $75,000 per year, which will not be reimbursed by the state. But I know Norwood's had a practice of always trying to support veterans as best as possible, so we are asking town meeting to consider these two exemptions. Any questions on that? Okay. Article 5 is what could be considered a housekeeping item. We were very surprised that Norwood's been using direct deposit to pay its employees both on the town and school side since the 1990s. And our new auditor firm came in last year and they pointed out that the town had not formally adopted the MGL that allows that practice, Chapter 41, Section 41B, which legally authorizes direct deposit payments. So we just want to clean that up and codify what we've already been doing for 30 years. And I think most employees would agree that direct deposit's better than getting a live check every 2 weeks. So If there's any questions on that one, we appreciate your support on this one. And vote, yeah. Article 6 is to codify contracts with a 5-year term for some specific items that we deal with. So our procurement law, the Uniform Procurement Act, generally caps the number of years, the maximum number of years of a contract that you can sign to 3 years. But with the exception, town meeting can grant up to 5-year contracts. So this came to light when the school department recently awarded contracts for bus transportation and food services. And they would have been better favorable rates if we were able to go to a 5-year deal, but we did not have the ability to do that at this time. So that's why I brought this to the forefront. We said, let's see if town meeting would consider going to 5 years for those two services, plus also energy solutions could offer greater benefits as well to go to a 5-year deal. So we've done this before. Town meeting previously authorized back in May of 2021. We did a 5-year contract at the time for digital software, hardware, licensing, and curriculum textbooks for the school department. So it's not the first time we're asking town meeting to consider 5-year contracts. So what this article would do would be to approve to amend the procurement policy allowing 5-year contracts specifically to these services: bus transportation, food services, and energy solutions. If there's any questions on that, we'll hear first.
Can Norwood go back then and renegotiate these contracts to the 5-year and then get a better rate?
That's a good question. You know, Jeff? No, it's so.
So unfortunately, the contracts were awarded already for the bus transportation and food services. The energy solutions, we are holding off on that. So we're in the process of natural gas bidding right now. We are holding off until after town meeting because there's a significant decrease in rates between the 3-year and the 4-year option.
That's it. Okay.
So we're holding off now, but the other two had to.
Oh, so they're locked. There's no way of renegotiating.
Correct.
Okay.
But if we, with the approval of this in 2 years, when we go back to the table, we can negotiate a better deal. Yeah. Debbie, you have a question?
If they don't perform.
Yeah.
Is there a dropout clause or however you?
Yeah, I think all of our contracts would have some non-performance language in that. Yeah, so whether it's a 3-year, 1-year, or 5-year deal, there's always ways to cut a contract. Yeah, procurement, make sure of that. Okay. I think for the next couple of articles, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah since they're land use related, starting with Article 7. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so Article 7 is an amendment to the zoning bylaw to a section regarding our floodplain overlay district. Essentially what this does is update our floodplain management bylaw to comply with recent changes in the National Flood Insurance Program. That's a program that allows residents to access federal flood insurance if their properties are within the affected areas. The NFIP requirements change every so many years, and we are obligated to adopt these regulations within 6 months of the NFIP's program updates. This town meeting, should these be adopted, would comply with that timeframe. The updated FEMA maps, which redefine the floodplain overlay district, are available for review on our GIS website. I will say we've been having some difficulty with the layers on that GIS website. So if anybody's logged on and had a hard time accessing them, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. We are working on them, but in the meantime, I can point you to a place on the NFIP's website where you can see those changes.
Do you have copies of those maps for the town meeting?
They're extensive, and I don't know that at the entire town size you'd get the level of detail that would be useful to you. But let me think on that and see if there's some sort of a way we can provide that information in real time, because I think that's a helpful suggestion. Steve?
Yes, I think the flood map dated July 8th, 2025. That hasn't happened yet. Can you please explain that date, or is that a typo?
We need to adopt our changes to the zoning bylaw by then. It's our deadline.
You're referencing the publication.
Yes, which is timed in correspondence with the effective date of the maps. So we need to be able to adopt these local regulations before the map change goes into effect. Does that make sense?
No, you said there's a report dated July 8th.
Yeah.
On page 3.
Right, so all of these changes go into effect in July. We have to adopt them locally before then.
Well, maybe you want to restate it then, the changes must be made effective by July
By
8th
then.
instead of, because here it looks like you're referencing a document that's
Understood.
stated in the future.
All right, terrific. Hopefully we're on track with all of our deadlines, but we'll definitely try to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, so what you're trying to say then is that we have to adopt it by July 8th. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
So maybe if you can, all right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully town meeting won't go until after July 8th. Hopefully it'll be a 2-night town meeting. It'll be okay. God willing.
Depends on the debate.
Sorry, I have a couple questions. First, what happens if we don't adopt it? What happens if we don't have enough information to vote to adopt it?
So if we don't, then our participation in NFIP is compromised. The residents won't be able to access that flood insurance program. I will say, we did not write these regulations locally. Most of the language was given to us by the state. The local kind of editorial bits that we added were appointing, which town entity serves as the floodplain administrator. So that's a change. Previously, it was the building department. These changes propose it to be the conservation planner. Right now, that's Carly Rockland. She's our environmental planner in the dev department. And a couple of other very small, like minor type changes. But the vast majority of this text is being presented to you as it was given to us by the state.
My follow-up question then is about this, is one of the things that will put us into compliance with our new Massachusetts statewide building codes, but it doesn't say what the new building codes are. Would the impacts of the building codes that are now being implemented by the state impact our local building codes? Like, would we then have to go to?
That's a great question for Gary.
We only have one code, and that is the state building code, and the 10th edition goes into effect July 1st. Floodplain construction is regulated by the state building code, and so the new adopted code is actually 6 years ahead of what the current code is. So right now we follow the 2015 I codes, IBC, IRC, etc. The state has adopted July 1st the 2021 I codes with mass amendments, and again in that, floodplain construction is covered in that building code. So we would want to be compliant with the 2021 state building codes, which will continually reference the FEMA maps as well as what we are mapping as our updated floodplains.
Okay, and that brings me to the new FEMA maps. Are there going to be areas of Norwood that aren't currently impacted by the regulations that will be put in place by agreeing to this, so that residents of Norwood now that are not in existing flood areas will, by this new map, be in existing flood areas, thus requiring them to get insurance that they don't have to have right now?
Well, it's an eligibility. It's a whether or not if they're not in the floodplain as it exists today on the map, and the map has expanded to bring them into the floodplain, they wouldn't have access to private insurance. They would have to go through the federal.
So there's no grandfathering.
Yeah, so adopting this language does not change whether or not your property is or is not affected by the floodplain. It impacts your access to insurance, to flood insurance.
Okay, so the new map, so have people who will be impacted, are they getting any type of notification? Are they getting any, like, are people in town seeing this map? Like, are the people we represent having an opportunity to say, hey, wait a minute, this is gonna mess up my current state of being with my insurance?
I can say that I on a case-by-case basis, I can't tell you what areas in particular are affected. So if we'd encourage people to access the GIS map, which shows you the floodplains and the overlays, and and it will show your parcel.
Yeah, my concern goes back to people like the veterans. If you're talking about the older populations, less access to internet, less tech savvy, so getting on a website that's already glitchy by your own admission is going to be really hard for residents. And I just feel like if this is going to be impacting people's insurance, that some type of notification should probably be sent out.
Yeah, I will have to follow up to see if there's any way that we can use, or maybe FEMA has this information already aggregated, lists of affected properties. I have these maps and I can see the changing boundaries, you know, of the floodplain areas. So many of these changes are very minor. It's not that entire portions of town are now in a floodplain that weren't. It can look like, I mean, I was looking at a property today with a homeowner where, you know, the rear portion of their property had a shed that did not used to be in the floodplain, but now the shed is. The line moved up on just the western side of the backyard. But in the neighbor's property, you know, what used to be a straight line, right? Like the floodplain goes right through here, almost parallel to the Neponset River. Right now it reflects the grading and the geography. So where that shed might be in the floodplain here, next door, the entire backyard now is no longer in the floodplain. It's a lot of kind of minor changes to the contour of that line. I think is probably a reflection of changing technology, better being able to pick up the actual risks on these properties, which I think ultimately is a good thing. So it's not the entire floodplain has categorically expanded, you know, 30%. Which is good news, but also I do think makes it a little bit trickier to try to kind of aggregate like a mailing list, so to speak. But I will absolutely follow up on that and see if that's possible, because I agree. I think it's important for residents to know something so important about their properties. Yeah.
It will really affect the property values of some of those homes too, because Arbella, for instance, won't grant flood insurance if there's no body of water near your home. Whether it's a floodplain or not, it's not a body of water. So then you have to go get private insurance. So if somebody's trying to sell a home, are you gonna have to disclose to the potential buyer through your realtor that they're gonna have to get private insurance?
I don't have the answer for you. That's out of my area of expertise. What I can tell you is that our goal here is try to make sure that everybody has access to as many options for flood insurance as possible. And that's the goal of this specific zoning article.
Have some of these floodplains changed because of overbuilding and paving over areas? So we created the problem that increased the floodplain?
I couldn't tell you the answer to that question. I think it's probably more largely related to climate change and kind of, you know, the increasing water levels and flooding events. But again, we've received the maps and the language from FEMA, right? This is the intent of the zoning change.
So did FEMA come in and go through the whole town of Norwood and figure this out? Or how did they determine these?
I think they use mostly aerial technology and GIS.
Yeah, they consider rainfall, they consider, you know, a multitude. This is science, and they update these maps regularly based on historical data and how that data changes. And it's not just Norwood, it's you know, obviously it's federal, but it impacts the whole state, from coastal regions to riverfront regions to wetlands.
To go back to perk testing.
All right, I'll take one more question on this one, and then just to be respectful of everybody's time, we can move on. And then if anybody has additional questions, I should have said this at the beginning, to your point earlier, please do call my office. There's only so much we can get to, I think, here in one night, but we are available, you know, 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, to answer any questions that folks have. Somebody, Ed Ferris, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, posting to the town site is probably the easiest thing to do. If you could post anything, even if it was just screenshots of what you see, it would be helpful for this.
Yes, thank you. All right, so our next one is the amendment to section 5.4 on non-conforming uses and structures. This one is a little wonky, so I'll do my best to try to make it as easily understood as possible, but like, bear with me, buckle up a little bit. So right now, our current bylaw requires a special permit for any changes to pre-existing non-conforming 1 and 2 family residential structures. A non-conforming structure is one that does not comply with the current zoning bylaw, but most likely did at the time it was constructed. Okay. Some of you may have heard the term grandfathering something in. We don't use that comment as much anymore. It's more accurate to be able to say it's pre-existing non-conforming. Now, if you at present have a pre-existing non-conforming home, and many residents in Norwood do, perhaps your lot is undersized. So the area, the total size of your lot is smaller than what is required in your district today in 2025, and you want to put on an addition to your home. The bylaw right now requires that you go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and receive a special permit in order to do that. If you are in a conforming lot, so you live in a house that has more than enough area and it conforms in every other way, and you want to build an addition, but you want to put it into your rear setback right now. So you want to build it closer to your rear neighbors than is presently allowed. Right now, you need to get a variance, right? We talked about that earlier. That's your special exception to the bylaw. You have to be able to establish that essentially there's something really unique about your property and there's a really compelling circumstance where you deserve that exception in the form of a variance. Right now, there's a disparity in the way our current zoning bylaw is written, in that if you are conforming, you need the variance to encroach into a setback to create a new nonconformity. But if you're short on your lot area or your frontage, or you're currently pre-existing nonconforming in some other way, it's a special permit. Does that make sense? Is everybody with me so far? I haven't lost anyone. Okay. Further, our zoning bylaw says that if you are in that category of pre-existing non-conforming, you're putting on this addition, you're getting the special permit, it says that you are required to get that special permit if the addition, alteration, the change that you're making increases the habitable floor area of your home by more than 25%. Anything below 25%, the bylaw says that doesn't increase the non-conformity of the property. Essentially, it's so minor, it doesn't warrant further review. And Gary's able to issue a building permit for that, by right. It doesn't need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeal. 25% increase is relatively small. Most people, when they put on an addition to their home, even if it's just expanding their kitchen a little bit or adding on 1 bedroom, just what we've seen based on sizes of homes in Norwood, 25% sends a lot to the ZBA, right? As people, especially now with the housing market being the way it is, people are trying to stay in place, make their homes work for themselves and their families, not moving as often, right? So we see a lot of volume of these special permit applications go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And with any process, we always want to look at that and say, is this serving its purpose, right? The purpose of these special permit reviews is to make sure that construction is not substantially more detrimental to the town generally and to the neighborhoods where this activity is happening. What we have found is that despite this high volume of special permit requests that go to the ZBA, the vast majority of them are granted by the ZBA. And the vast majority of those are even granted without conditions, meaning there's not even any sort of adjustment that the ZBA requests in order to make it, meet that threshold of being not more detrimental. And I recognize that this is my opinion, but I hope you'll accept it. I don't believe that the ZBA is just free with their approvals. They give a great deal of thought to every application that comes before them. I think you're fortunate in this town to have a ZBA that really understands the bylaw and the legal thresholds. They do a really good job in their review. What they're finding is simply that most of these applications are not substantially more detrimental. However, they don't have the ability to apply that higher standard for the types of projects that create new nonconformities, or the ones that actually get closer to the side lot lines, right? They are obligated under our current bylaw to consider a special permit only for any type of addition for these properties. So going back to our changes here, what's proposed and what you will be asked to consider at town meeting is really two essential changes to this section of the bylaw. One says that if you are creating a new nonconformity, whether you're pre-existing nonconforming or not, that requires a variance. It achieves some consistency on how that is applied across town. But on the flip side of that, what it also does is it lifts that 25% increase in habitable floor area that triggers review to the ZBA at all. It lifts that to 75%. The intention here is to try to focus the review of the ZBA on the cases that are most likely to actually have some detrimental impact to the neighbors. It'll send more cases to the ZBA with a higher level of review for those additions that do get maybe uncomfortably close to the neighbors, right? Or are a little bit taller than expected and might block privacy or daylight or the types of things that we see that residential butters care about. But what it does do is it gives a little bit more flexibility for homeowners to be able to improve their properties in modest ways without needing to go to the zoning board, spend the money on the permitting fees, have the delay of their project, and go through this process that, you know, notifies all of their neighbors within 300 feet for something that's at 25% is a pretty minor change to their structure. Questions?
Sorry.
Don't apologize.
I get them out here.
No, I told you to wait, so go ahead. You're first.
So I think 25% being a minor change depends on your lot size, right? It depends depending on where you are in Norwood. If I think in my neighborhood, it would be a minor change, but I think in some neighborhoods, it might be a much bigger change for 25% of your house. So I'm curious, for my two questions would be, how did we jump from 25 to 75 as opposed to 25 to 50? And what recourse do neighbors have if you're in a neighborhood that has smaller lot size and that 25% does feel much more aggressive or
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It is kind of an art form, right? To be able to draft policy that achieves this goal, but also applies to the entire town with this whole variety of lot sizes and home sizes, right? The size of your home, that structure matters too. Just to kind of explain some of the process here. This was something that the building commissioner and I had recognized, that's part of our job, is to kind of identify these trends. And we both have experience working in other towns too. So we have a sense as to how other communities kind of handle this, which is sometimes helpful for perspective. The planning board discussed this a bit and decided to create like an ad hoc working group. So 2 representatives from the planning board, 2 representatives from the zoning board of appeals, plus staff met and really kind of talked all of that through. What is the number? And that was a big subject of that conversation. We talked about changes, 25 all the way up to 100%. What is that appropriate threshold? And 75% was where that group landed on. In part by looking at the volume of applications and the type of activity that comes before the ZBA, to kind of think about, again, of all of these special permits that they receive, and looking at each of those cases, which ones do end up rising to that level of potentially being very impactful to the neighbors. And that group had consensus that 75% was a reasonable threshold to warrant that additional
Do
review.
we know if one of the considerations is how many people show up at the meeting to speak on the 25 versus the 75? Because for me, the more important piece isn't how many applications have to go through the people who are doing the job. My more important piece is, do people have an opportunity to speak out and feel represented and heard? Additionally, I personally have not had very good experiences with the zoning board of appeals in terms of properties owned by contractors, right? And so for me, when we talk about properties for contract, that contractors own, or builders in Norwood, particularly builders up and down in Norwood. I have particular issues with freelancing sort of their work without the ability to. So does this go just for property owners, or is it contractor building properties?
Yep. So I think that's a fair question. And I think that's in part why we really try to make sure that the bylaw itself, right, sets as fair a guideline as possible, because that standard has to be applied to structures no matter who owns them, right? Or how many neighbors come and speak in favor or against. You know, the standards are what they are. And we have to apply them evenly in order for them to be fair. And again, it's an imperfect craft, right? Trying to figure out what, if there is a number, right, what that appropriate number can and should be. What I can tell you is that the working group gave, a great deal of thought to that and thought that the 75% would be an appropriate level of review. Anything below that 75% increase, and reminder that because of the variance required, then those projects that are additions under a 75% increase in habitable floor area wouldn't go to the zoning board if it was proposed fully within the confines of the setbacks.
Right.
So this is not an addition that's getting built too close. It's fully abiding by the zoning bylaw in every other respect. Those are the ones that have the more increased, ease of permitting, essentially not going to. It really tries to focus. The projects that go to the ZBA are the ones that really are the most deserving of that extra scrutiny and the notice to abutters who deserve to know about, those increased intensity type. It's really trying to focus that in the right direction where it's most deserved.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Does this only apply to additions, or does it also include non-conforming vacant lots?
Well, this would only apply to a pre-existing non-conforming single 1 or 2 family home.
Okay.
So
Where
a
does
vacant
the-
lot would have to comply with the current zoning.
The second question is, how does this relate to ADUs?
In what regard?
If you're increasing the floor space, as you mentioned, family and this and that, the other
So
thing,
if
are
you're,
you creating an in-law apartment, or are you creating a separate,
so
segment?
the statute for ADUs does not allow a special permit for the creation of an ADU, whether it's attached or detached. So if you are in a pre-existing non-conforming, and it specifically protects pre-existing non-conforming structures. So if you have a pre-existing non-conforming single-family home, and you are going to put an addition on with an ADU, okay, that ADU is subject to the dimensional restrictions of the principal dwelling unit only, not for the use. We cannot require, statute does not allow a town to regulate the creation of a protected use ADU by special permit. It has to be by right. But the dimensional requirements for the district
So
for that principal dwelling unit would apply to the ADU. Setbacks, height and area, etc.
And that's what section 5.4, the types of changes we're talking about here. These are special permits that are granted against the dimensional requirements, not necessarily how the addition is going to be used. It's really relating to expansion of the structure itself and the dimensional requirements there. And Steve.
Yeah, I think this is dependent on where the home is. In some cases, someone can expand 75%, no problem. In other cases, 25%, you're encroaching on the neighbors. I don't know. I think this has to be on a case-by-case basis.
Well, again, that's the first thing that happens with any proposed addition is it gets a zoning review by me to see, number one, is it conforming or non-conforming? By lot area, side setback, rear setback, what are the non-conformities? And as what this does is, if you're going to increase that non-conformity, that would not qualify for a special permit. That with this change, you're increasing that non-conformity. If you've got a 5-foot side setback and you want to make it 4 feet, or you want to encroach on another rear setback, that would then require a variance, which is a more difficult thing to do. So the increase that we're talking about here is simply in the habitable floor area without creating new nonconformities. So you can't infringe on a rear setback where you once didn't. You may just have a lot that is undersized or lacks frontage, or is non-conforming on the left side, but you're gonna put the addition on the right side where you have plenty of room, and you're gonna add 450 square feet to 1,000 square foot ranch. Right now, I would have to send you to the zoning board of appeals for a special permit, which again is typically not, the board is gonna find that it doesn't increase the non-conforming nature or create a new non-conforming, doesn't increase the non-conforming nature of it, and is not more detrimental to the neighborhood. That's what they're looking at. It's a single family house today, it's a single family house tomorrow. You're not adding 15 bedrooms, you're adding a family room or a kitchen or a bathroom or a master suite, something to that effect. So it almost always universally gets approved.
But how is this?
This is just raising the threshold. It's allowing a little bit more leniency for size without having the arduousness of going through the Board of Appeals.
Provided that they're constructing it within the setback.
But how do you know?
How do we know?
Yeah,
Because
when
we
someone,
require a
someone,
building, we can require a certified plot plan with the building permit application.
at that point, you determine whether.
That's when I make my determination on whether it's conforming and not conforming, what's the non-conformity, and whether or not it needs to be referred to the ZBA for special permit, whether it needs a variance, or whether it's allowed by right.
What about neighbors? Would that include if neighbors have to be, if there's encroachment on the rear or, you know?
No, if it requires a special permit or a variance, it goes to a public hearing. And then butters are notified, and the butters can come to the meeting, listen, and they can speak to the board with their concerns. But if it doesn't require a special permit because it meets the criteria, then it would be approved by right for the expansion.
John, did we have a question online?
Yes, Sarah's is online. Ed, go ahead.
Hi. I understand the efficiency question involved here. I understand what you're trying to accomplish. But the problem is the way you're presenting this, your numbers don't make any sense. I've done this a couple of different times right now, using a quarter-acre lot, square and rectangle. And a 75% increase is huge. I understand the checks and balances involved. But if you're going to present this, you already gave three examples. And you should be showing those examples, like how does this actually apply? Because we're going to see the text of it like we are tonight. And then we're going to go over these exact same questions again during town meeting, because you don't have any data to support your number.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to do like an active listening and try to rephrase this like rule in plain English, see if that helps folks.
Thanks.
And see if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So there are like 5 or 6 ways your property could be in violation of today's rules. So it might be too far this way or too far that way or too far that way. Okay, let's say one of those things is wrong. If you want to make it really big and you change it in a way that's not wrong today or wrong in that way that's already wrong, you're good. If you're going to break any of those rules, or you're going to break the rule even worse, no go, get a variance. If you're not going to break a rule, you're cool as long as it's not huge, 75%. And so the point about the rectangles, it's a good one. I thought about that, but not every house is one floor. So if you have a 3-story house, you can add like 10 feet to the left, but you've got 30 feet to the left, and I'll square it. Don't ask me, square it. Now you've got a lot of feet. But you haven't really
So
moved
it's
that much.
habitable floor area. It's not the 75%.
Yeah, habitable, exactly. Yeah.
Habitable floor area. It's not gross floor area. So, and we determine that by the assessor's records.
Yeah, so the basement, maybe not, but
Maybe
first
not
floor,
be
second floor,
finished.
third floor, you name it.
So again, the example of you could have a 950 square foot ranch and expand it up.
Right.
You could do it up without creating, as long as you don't expand and create a non-conformancy that, dimensionally, and you don't eclipse that 75% habitable floor area, that would be allowed without having to get either a variance or a special permit.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
Did
That's
I
helpful.
more or
Yeah.
less?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, one more and then we'll move on. I know it's getting late, so I want to be respectful of our last time.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. This is kind of abstract. It would be helpful, I think, when you present this, to provide some examples. Like,
Yeah,
this is.
we do
not
have
the
some,
covered by
we do have some pictures that we're preparing for
That
town
would
meeting.
be
That'll be
awesome,
helpful.
because
Yeah.
it is, it is like Ed's trying to do. He's trying to draw a diagram, trying to
Yeah.
figure this out. Like, it would be helpful to have some good examples that show this, and I think that would like help people in this.
Great feedback. Thank you so much. All right. The others are fairly straightforward. Article 9 is addressing commercial and personal kennels, animal kennels in the MBTA communities multifamily overlay district. So last March, we created a new district, the MBTA communities multifamily overlay district, which, thinking back to our diagram of the table of uses, created a new column. Separately, we had another article that created some new rows about kennels, both commercial kennels and personal kennels, and where they're allowed throughout town. That created a new row. Since we had two different articles at the same time and we couldn't anticipate what would happen with one without the other, right now we have a blank space where they come together, and we don't have any sort of response as to whether it's a Y, an N, a PB, or a BA. For those kennels in the MBTA communities multifamily overlay district. That's what this article is, and it seeks to say that they are not allowed in that district.
For veteran town meeting members, this is what Mr. Hopcroft has questioned, the fact that this was missing. And so this is a procedural article in order to take care of that, which could not get done until the MBTA communities multifamily overlay district was approved by the state.
Right. So here we are finally getting to fill that blank space.
What happens to people who already have a kennel?
So this is an overlay district. So yeah, I don't think there's actually anybody who would be impacted by this yet. We've permitted one development that hasn't even started construction under the MBTA communities district. So it really is just going to pertain to future residents in properties that were developed under that overlay. Okay, and so this next one is about multifamily uses within the Boston Providence Highway District. Back in 2021, town meeting voted on a series of articles that concern development in the Route 1 corridor. One was the creation of a brand new zoning district. It was a very ambitious piece of zoning. It created an entirely new district for the property directly on Route 1, northbound and southbound from, one side of the town to the other. Previously, it was kind of a patchwork quilt of different zoning districts with different requirements. The BPH was created to really kind of streamline that and create a cohesive district that promoted, a handful of goals. One of them was increasing the amount of green space, improving our landscaping requirements, making it visibly more attractive with a more streamlined sign bylaw, and also encouraging a more consistent mix of uses designed to encourage business growth in our prime business corridor in town. Separately, we also had two other articles that created MUODs, mixed use overlay districts. These are smaller pockets, little bubbles located within the BPH in two separate locations, one being around the intersection of University Ave and Everett. We call that the Northern Gateway MUOD, and the other MUOD is around the Vanderbilt area. These would be overlays, so zoning kind of layered on top of the underlying Boston Providence Highway zoning district that would further allow for different types of development there. mixed use, meaning a development where you could have both commercial and residential in the same mix, sometimes even in the same building. In downtown areas, that looks like ground floor commercial, you know, your retail with residential above. But that's what that looks like. So at the time, when planning board spent all of its time kind of drafting this change and then gave the language to town meeting, there was a lot of discussion centered around multifamily housing use. And there were a lot of concerns about what the impacts of that would be. And so the planning board studied that. There were traffic studies. If you were there in 2021, you might remember the exceptionally long presentation from our traffic engineer about multifamily housing use in the Boston Providence Highway District. And so the intention was that multifamily housing would only be permitted in these MUODs in the context of a mixed-use development where there would be commercial to offset the economic impact of residential. That it would not be permitted generally throughout the Boston Providence Highway District. And you can see in the way the zoning bylaw is written now that there was some intention for that to be reflected. Right now, there's a footnote to that table of uses that says, you know, in the mixed use overlay districts, you have to follow the requirements that are detailed later in the bylaw in section such and such. So much about zoning is about syntax. It's a legal document, and, you know, Gary will tell you that sometimes when we get tricky questions or is this allowed, is this not allowed, it really comes down to reading word for word, what exactly does this mean? Pulling in town council, you know, our attorneys to be able to help us discern, you know, what does this actually say? The devil is in the details. And in this case, we are seeking to clarify this section of the bylaw because it may be interpreted now to mean that multifamily housing is permissible by special permit throughout the Boston Providence Highway District. Which was not the intention, certainly, of planning board when it advanced this zoning. We don't believe it was the intention of town meeting when it voted to adopt the Boston Providence Highway District either. This could be very impactful, right? This type of, the scale of this could have a big impact on the type of businesses or residences that are developed on Route 1. And so the planning board proposes this change to further clarify that multifamily only be permitted within the confines of those two MUODs. The intention here is to return the language to the intent of town meeting when it voted on this. But again, it's appropriate for town meeting to make that call. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
Sorry. This is very specific to my personal interest, but I'm just not familiar enough with the language. I know that our town is currently in a lawsuit with David Spiegel over the 596 Conflict Street address, which, by the way, he's currently taking trees and working on that he's not supposed to. But besides the point, so my question for you is: does the change in this specific language impact that lawsuit in any way, shape, or form that would provide increased rights to the owner of the property?
No.
Okay, thank you.
This would pertain to development moving forward after town meeting and after the Attorney General approves any change that this town meeting may make to the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. And again, I know I said this before, but some of this, you know, we can't necessarily answer any question. If you or anybody else who's watching has other questions, I really do encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to call us at town hall, send us emails, call or email us. We'd be happy to answer all of your questions before town meeting, so you feel prepared.
Yes, sure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody at home. Good night.